Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel, Megan Abroad. It feels good to be back, and I'm joining you here from Medellín. So today's video is gonna be about reading books from the country that I'm actually staying in. So since I'm staying in Colombia, I thought it would be interesting to get to know the culture a little bit better through literature. I think reading books from other countries is a great way to broaden your perspective and also get to know the country of that culture a bit better beyond the surface level things that you might experience in a 2-week holiday. So I picked out 3 books today which I'm going to review, and in between I'm going to show you some clips of me exploring around Medellín. So I did some research online and I was reading some articles about books that were recommended either from Colombian people themselves or actually other Colombian authors. So I picked 3 that were interesting to me. Let's jump into the books. So the first book that I read was called The Bitch, also in Spanish La Perra, and it's by Pilar Quintana, and it's a short book just hovering around 100 pages. I'm gonna try and keep my reviews spoiler free, so in case you want to check them out you can read them as well. So this book was short, it had very simple prose but a lot of dark symbolism and imagery, and the main character is this woman called Damaris. She lives on the Pacific coast in a small town, essentially by the jungle in Colombia. And we start off seeing her perspective where she describes her failed attempts at becoming a mother. I say failed, but she really goes into that kind of experience, how it shaped her relationship with her husband and these unfulfilled wishes of being a mother, and how it's kind of turned her a bit bitter, her relationship a bit bitter as well. And then she ends up adopting a dog called ChillD'em. She named the dog after the daughter that she could never have. So we kind of follow her along as she's now adopted this dog, and it becomes a bit symbolic of her unfulfilled wishes to become a mother. I won't say anything more, I think I'll leave it at that, but I definitely enjoyed how dark this book is, and it gets to some of the real issues. But with this level of symbolism you can still follow along with. It covers themes such as class struggles between the rich and the poor, undue expectations on a woman, and this expectation of having a child to fulfill your role in society or your role to yourself of what does your life mean without that or with that. It also talks about trauma. Yeah, it's a very dark book, but I think the novel had a lot to say and said it with brevity, which I really appreciated because it was just something very different that I hadn't read before. I would say also that one of the things that I really took out of this, which you'll see in a later book that I talk about, is the jungle and how nature represents this symbolism. And in the translator's notes, it even said this thing about the jungle is like a character itself in this book, which I think is absolutely true. You can see through the descriptions, through the respect, and through the actual fear and challenges that the jungle poses, because she is always traveling through the jungle. She lives very much inside the jungle, and it also comes to represent a lot of the darkness in her mind, in her life. And you'll see as well how it interacts with her husband, the dog as well. So I really enjoyed it. I think it definitely has a lot to say in a small amount of pages, and I really liked the author's style of it. So I will read some quotes for you as well. I didn't prepare this, but I have my e-reader so I can read some quotes about that as well. Well, it has to turn on now. Okay, I didn't prepare so well for this. So I read some quotes for you as well. So here's one. The heat was so muggy that she felt it sticking to her skin like slime. And it was as if the cacophony of frogs and crickets, as unbearable as the music at the disco in the next town, came not from the jungle but from inside her head. On her way back, she came across an ant invasion, thousands and thousands of them advancing through the jungle like an army. They were black, medium-sized ants that emerged from their underground nests and dragged off every bug they could find, dead or alive. She had to run to make it past them, but some managed to climb onto her and bit her hands and feet as she shook them off. Though the bites stung like fire, the pain faded quickly and left no welts. Anyway, I recommend this book. I give it 4 stars. Okay, let's move on to book number 2, which is Vortex by Jose Eustacio Rivera. And this is a book which is regarded as more or less a classic of 20th century Latin American literature. It's following this guy named Arturo Cova. He escapes from Bogota with his lover Alicia, and they are kind of going out on this adventure together. They are both a bit lost, and it follows him as he goes along, and basically he also ends up into the jungle in the Amazon. He starts to uncover some of these horrible tragedies that have been connected to the rubber boom, and he meets some of the people who have escaped from working for rubber barons, and he is essentially seeking vengeance against one of them. And it's really interesting because this was based on the author's actual experiences when he spent time there, and so you can see from the descriptions that it's very real. And previously I had known nothing about these sort of human rights violations that were happening during the rubber boom. Essentially there was a lot of violence committed against the workers. They sort of forced them into this indebted servitude where the company, the rubber company, would lend the workers money, and then they would start working from them, but they could never pay back what they owed because they were forced to buy things like food and clothing back from the company that were working for, and they were at such exorbitant prices that no matter how much they worked, they would essentially be stuck in debt forever. And also the violence committed against the workers, just the injustice as well. You follow along some smaller stories that are all interconnected with this main one. And in this one, I was also surprised to see that, again, you see this jungle as almost a character of itself. The author's writing is very poetic and lyrical in its descriptions of the nature and also some of the characters. Yeah, I think on the plus side, I didn't know much about this part of history in South America because it also doesn't just affect Colombia, but also the other intersecting countries like Venezuela and Peru and everything. But so that was interesting, and also the adventure part in the jungle was interesting. The reason why I didn't enjoy this book so much was because, first of all, the main character you're following, he's sort of an anti-hero. He's not a very likable character. He is kind of sleeping around. He's not super loyal. He is changing his mind constantly about whether he wants to be with Alicia or not. He's not the best guy. And I also felt like the writing got a bit tedious, especially in the first half. They had me a bit gripped when they were leaving Bogota together, the two characters. But then it was a bit tedious with the descriptions of things that seem to have nothing to do with the central story. I mean, he goes to a ranch and he spends time there, and then he is trying to gather bulls, and he meets all these different characters along the way, and then those characters fade in and out of the story. And the most interesting part was the actual part in the jungle for me, and one of the characters who was looking for his son who got stuck into this indebted servitude. And the rest kind of felt like just a series of events that were not super related. And the other thing I would say is that the views at this time, because this is early 20th century, that the attitudes from the main character and how he's describing indigenous people in the Amazon is definitely outdated and racist, and does reflect that. So I would say it's something to be aware of. It was, I guess, a product of the time, but it is something to be aware of. And at the end of the day, I think the writing, although lyrical, the overall story description, there was very little character development, which I would have liked to see a bit more. And also, I would have liked to see just a bit more closer focus onto that jungle part. And I think that would have made it a better story. But I do see why this is a classic, and I think it was a good read overall. I just didn't enjoy it so much. So I think I did appreciate learning, like getting to see that writing style and learning about this piece of history in the form of a story, but because of those issues with the storytelling and the character development, I would have to give it 3 stars. So here you can see some of the lyrical descriptive style that the author had. They had forgotten how to smile, and if they tried, the result was strained, spasmodic, and demented in appearance. With their red-lined eyes, tremulous pulses, and emaciated, feverish bodies, they waited for the sun to indicate its return. They searched for the smallest piece of the sky, the most inconsequential opening in the lofty canopy of green, but nothing. Gradually, it began to drizzle. No one said said anything, but their looks spoke volumes. And another one. Here you can see the author describing how the robber barons would take advantage of the workers. The workers are usually in debt and they can't quit while they owe the company money. They're in debt because the company advances them foods, tools, and supplies at exorbitant prices. Then it buys their buckets of sap at ridiculously low ones. Plus, most workers can't read and never have much idea what gets written in their accounts. The books are always cooked in favor of the company. In practice, rubber tappers are no better than slaves. They can't ever work off their debts, and when a man dies, his son sometimes inherits the debt and has to slave in his father's place. Okay, so that's it for The Vortex. Let's move on to the next book. Okay, on to our third and final book for this video. Of course, this video would not be complete if I didn't include the most famous author of Colombia and one of the most famous authors of Latin America, which is Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And I was debating whether to read his most famous work, which is probably unequivocally 100 Years of Solitude, but I decided to go for something shorter because 100 Years of Solitude is just over 400 pages. I wanted to work up to it to see if I really liked his writing style before committing to that book. So I read Chronicle of a Death Foretold. Yeah, just to mention as well, Gabriel Garcia Marquez did so much for Latin America literature. He actually won the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1982. They give him a nickname in his country of Colombia. They call him Gabo. Yeah, I think in all Spanish-speaking countries, Marquez is highly regarded. When I read this book, I can see why he made such an impact. His writing style is very particular. So this story is very simple story, but the way he tells it, you kind of peel back the layers and you are still itching to know more and to keep reading. And in this story, there is a main character, which is Santiago Nassar. There is a bride who gets returned from her husband for not being a virgin, and she claims that he is the one who deflowered her, and her brothers want to avenge her honor, and that is Santiago Nassar, who they end up killing. This is not a spoiler, this is in the first couple pages you will see, and of course the name of the book is very obvious. And why it's interesting is because essentially the entire town knew it was going to happen, and you follow along as it's essentially told from an investigative journalist point of view, where he sort of unpeels the layers of the story and how everybody came to know and why the story wasn't prevented and if it's actually true and all these things. So I liked it because you get to see kind of this small town narrative, how everybody knows each other, and it's all surrounded by drama and gossip and people's history with one another and all the interconnectedness of their lives. And like I said, it's a very simple concept and a simple story, but Marquez manages to make it interesting so that you want to keep reading. And again, this is another brief novel. It's about 120 pages, so again, I appreciate the brevity of keeping a novel small, but still having something interesting to say, and yeah, you want to follow along with it. There's still some unanswered questions, kind of leaves it up to your imagination of what happened at the end. Yeah, I would say I enjoyed this story. Marquez has a distinct writing style where, like I said, it's a simple story, but you want to keep reading it. So I have to appreciate that. And overall, I give it 3.75 stars because it was short and interesting, and I liked the story. But yeah, I would say it didn't blow me away. I was would still recommend you check it out, and I think I will definitely be reading some more Marquez's work in the future. So that concludes the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed watching as much as I enjoyed making it. Reading these 3 books definitely did give me more of a glimpse into Colombian culture. I got to learn about the prevalence and the respect that Colombians have for nature and for the jungle. I also got to see this intersection of small town life with nature, with people's lives. And I also got to see, of course, in the bitch, some of the more modern concerns and modern struggles that Colombians are going through, as well as some more of the historical ones with the robber barons and that sort of darker piece of history as well. I also got to explore a little bit around of where I'm living in Medellín, so I hope you enjoyed coming along with me. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!